You're listening to a bonus episode of The Dairy Edge featuring Teagasc's weekly Let's Talk Dairy webinar series, which is also available as a podcast.
So good morning, folks. You're very welcome to this week's Let's Talk Dairy webinar. We have a colleague of my own in terms of Martina Gormley. Martina has, a keen interest and also a focus on everything related to labour efficiency, and I suppose that one work-life balance and how we juggle that. So, Martina, you have an interest in labour and all things labour and labour efficiencies, and sometimes not the easiest of conversations at farm level. We'll put it like that, and maybe hard sometimes to get engagement, I suppose, in that conversation. But I suppose, where are we at? We're heading into September. I suppose, where are we at in terms of labour requirements on farms? Give us a feel for what's maybe happening and what farmers should possibly be thinking about over the next couple of months.
Thanks, James, for having me on. So look, James, I suppose at the minute, a lot of farmers have taken some time off, which is really, really good to see. I've been out to a fair few groups over the last few weeks, and certainly farmers are more refreshed after the spring and the breeding season. I suppose one thing to note is the amount of time, I suppose, that's been taken off. There's a big variation there. So anything from, a couple of days to some farmers, when you add up from January to now, haven't taken 4 and 5 weeks off at least. Okay, so a big variation. So great to see the time is being taken off. But there still is a big variation. I suppose the question we need to ask ourselves is, whatever time you've taken off at this stage, is it enough really? So that's the big question. So in terms of, I suppose, looking forward and I suppose what's happening from an employment point of view in terms of taking time off, I suppose we've some farmers at the minute quite happy with the staff that they have, be it part-time or full-time. And I suppose the big focus is keeping these people, and what do I need to keep doing to make sure these people stay with me for as long as possible. And for others, then it's a case of, I had a really hard spring last year. I'm still feeling the effects of it. I'm only getting over it, and I don't want that to happen again. So, what do I need to do? So those are the kind of questions, James, that the people are talking about.
And you're doing, obviously, and we maybe get into this in a moment in terms of the labour survey, and you've been working on that and developing it, I suppose, as well over the last number of months. But you're doing a lot of those assessments with discussion group members, farmer clients. I suppose, what are you seeing in terms of these farmers that do get, we'll say, enough time off, that maybe are more labour efficient? I suppose, what are the few key things there, maybe without getting into real depth, but what are the few key things or a few key differences you're seeing with these farms versus maybe the farms where time off is limited, the length of the working day maybe is longer than we'd like?
Okay, so there's a few. Look, there's lots of things really, but to boil it down to maybe 2 or 3 things that stand out for farmers that are taking some more time off or can easily take time off, we'll say, particularly after the calving period. So one thing that's quite notable in most of those farms is the milking times. Okay, so I've been talking a lot about milking times, James, because we need to be talking more about it. So they're milking earlier. So they're milking maybe anywhere from 3 to 4 o'clock. Okay. So
you're talking about evening milking time here.
Absolutely, James.
Where are we at nationally in terms of what you've looked at this data? Every farmer's milking at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the day now. Is that not the case?
Unfortunately not, James, but that is, I suppose, the target or the goal, and that's what we're working towards. It is improving, which is certainly a positive, but unfortunately we've a long way to go. So the data that I would have looked at, James, would show that around 25% of farmers would be able to be finished by 6 o'clock. So therefore 75% are outside of that. With some fair percentage of that 75% being quite late. Okay. So the reason I'm bringing that up is, number one, is in terms of attracting people into the business and also for the farmer themselves to have their evenings off. Okay. Because the perception is, if neighbours or students or so on and so forth are seeing the cows coming in and going out, quite late, 5, 6, 7 o'clock, they're saying this isn't for me to themselves. Okay, that's not the farm I want to work on, or that's not the career I want to have because and what more and more farmers are saying to me that they're really noticing in the people that's working for them is the importance of evenings off. Okay, time off, evenings off is really important. Okay, so that's one thing, a change that farmers have made, James. I suppose the other thing is trying to simplify the business that the wheels won't fall off when you go. And that's always the big concern. And that's, I suppose, why a lot of people don't take time off. They might say, oh, I don't need it and I'm fine and cows are calved and I'm grand. But really, the real reason when you dig deep there is that they're afraid of what's going to happen and what state is the farm going to be when they're gone. Okay, so the simpler the farm is, and a lot of farmers would say to me, the calving pattern is number one from a labour efficiency point of view, and from having people working on the farm that yes, it's absolutely really tough for those 6 weeks in particular. You need all hands on deck. You do need good facilities and you do need enough of space for calves, for calving, so on and so forth. But the reward really outweighs that quite intense period of time.
Yeah.
And particularly from getting off the farm and having employees there, that the cows are calved, it's blocked, okay, that job is done. The calf rearing is reduced. It's not spread out in terms of June, July, August. So there's still calves to be fed. There's still weaning going on. There's all different groups of staff. The calf rearing then process is much simplified because you have an even bunch of calves, and you don't have to be, having 2 groups or 3 groups of calves because they're feeding meal and so on and so forth. So that's more streamlined. It is a big one. And also, I suppose the at the back end of the year that you can actually dry off early and take a little bit more time off then. And you see a lot of farmers are doing it that they're giving staff extra time off and they're paying them. Okay, so that's a massive carrot, perhaps that we don't talk enough about, James, in terms of rewarding staff and keeping staff.
So that's really, I suppose those extra hours, and there's an understanding there that there's probably additional hours work to be done, obviously, in that spring period. But what you're saying is the idea maybe that there is a little bit of additional time off when it's not as intense on farms is something that people are looking at. So
yeah,
that's going to be alien now to some farmers, Martina, in terms of this idea of having staff, paying them the same amount of money on a weekly basis and not getting as much work out of them.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
That's a tough one.
But that's a big one, James, in terms of the mindset. And you're dead right. You're absolutely right. That's really foreign. You know what I mean? That sounds mad altogether. But I suppose farmers that have put in extremely tough springs in particular and hardship and have seen the consequences of not having enough help. Okay. And what we're talking about here, let's be frank, is mental health is number one. Right before we even go near the financials is mental health. Okay. Burnout. Okay. It's all related. The stress then of dealing with calf scour and things like that, like mentally that has a massive toll. Okay. And farmers know, and they've experienced it, that with calf scour or calves not sucking or things like that, that could take up hours, and you've all these other tasks not being done, and you're caught with this group of calves or a calf or whatever, trying to train them or so on and so forth. So they've realised that, they've said, this can't go on, and they've said, right, what do people actually want? That's in mind. Instead of what do initially always I want to get value and value and value, but what do people want, and can that work? So yeah, so look, that's the changes that's been made. They're offering, it was alien to give weekends off. That was a mad notion altogether, that an employee wouldn't work weekends. But now farmers are offering, and they're working around that. Okay, so they're offering Monday to Friday. They're offering 3 days a week, 2 days a week, 1 day a week. They're offering that, and their farms are flexible. And that's one thing. They're open all year round to a big extent. But there's a lot of flexibility there, and farmers are really honing into that, and they're offering it, and they're realizing that for that person to be there when I really, really need them in springtime, it's so crucial to get these cows calved, to look after my calves really, really well, to get the cow up and running for breeding time. They're saying, I need people, okay? I can have, and you need facilities and all that, but facilities alone won't get around not actually having hands and people there as well. So they're saying, right, in order to have them there, I need to have them here all year round. And it may be one day a week, whatever. So, I have had some farmers come to me and they've said in summertime in particular that I am standing there going, what am I going to do? I'm paying someone when I could be doing that job. And I'm standing there scratching my head going, what am I going to do? And so that to that person, it seems, oh my God, this is terrible. But that needs to happen. And look, if you won't take you too long to think of find other jobs or to take a little bit of time off, but that's what you need to happen. You need to have some periods of time in summer that you're not busy, right? And you're looking for a few jobs or whatever, but you're keeping people. Okay, so this notion, I want someone for spring. That doesn't work. Like when you think of people out there, it doesn't matter, students.
Everyone wants them in February, March, April. Everyone wants everyone in February, March, April. Martina, is your point here, really, is it?
Exactly. But how many people would that suit, James? That you would give them work for 3 months of the year and they've nothing for the other night.
See you next year again, yeah.
Yeah, so look, it's very, very few. Like, look, 98% of people that doesn't work for.
This could come in the form, Martina, of ultimately. It may be relief milkers for some people. It may be, as you say, someone 3 days a week. It may be full-time employees, depending on your labour requirements. But one thing that often comes up, and you'd be asked it more than I would be, but is, this whole notion in terms of costs, obviously, and the cost of labour and understandably, this year costs have remained high, and milk prices on the slide. So, from your analysis, these farms that maybe do have a little bit more labour, let that be the relief milkins or the part-time or the full-time or whatever it is, has it an impact on the bottom line in terms of the amount of money amount of cash that's actually generated on those farms?
It doesn't, James. It's actually the opposite. So farmers that have enough people working on the farm for the size of the farm and so on and so forth, and that are paying people quite well and have enough of help on the farm, they're still in the top 5 or 10% of profitability in the country. Because the question is, can you do everything? So farmers are skilled. Any task, when you look at any task on the farm, it's their business. They're able to do it, right? They love work. They've great attitude. It's their business. They're totally bought in. So when you look at any individual task, they're able to do it. But is there enough hours in the day? Is there enough hours in the year to actually do all the tasks and do them properly and do them when you should? And every farmer will say no. Unfortunately, there isn't. We can do everything, but we don't have the time to actually do everything properly. So there's a knock-on effect there that when you try and do too much, you spread yourself too thin, James, and you actually are losing out somewhere. So you're not doing your grass walks, okay? So the grass goes astray on you several times, and you're chasing your tail then, and your fat and protein has hit the floor, okay? You're not analysing your business because you're working so hard. You don't have time to actually sit down and say, does this make sense, or this opportunity, or where am I losing out here? Are the costs too high, and why? Stocking rate, so on. Am I keeping cows I shouldn't be keeping? I didn't even know, to be honest. I'm so busy with work. I didn't even analyse my milk recording to see that this cows here is not paying. So you're losing money somewhere else. So it's a fool's economy, really. So what I would always say is, can you afford not to pay people and not to have people? And when we look at the average size, and it doesn't matter even in springtime in farms that are below the average size, everybody needs help and everybody needs time out, and people are an asset. And some people say, oh, the cows are easier to manage than the people, okay? But we need people, and I think it's the wrong way to look at it, okay? There's some great people out there. If you spend time to find them and to train them, and to keep chipping away bit by bit, improving your yard, improving your facilities. It's not going to be done in a year or two. It all takes time. Have your priority list and keep chipping away at it, and you'll get there. Okay. Look, I'll just end that question on people are an asset, and keep that in mind. They pay you quite well. So pay them well, look after them, and you will reap the rewards for that in terms of profitability, in terms of your mental health and time off and so on and so forth.
I think that's an important point, that ultimately there's more than, I suppose, there's a bigger return than just time off, albeit a very important one, as you say, in terms of these people are adding value to your business, and that's often misunderstood as such. But I suppose we're not taking away from the fact that, Martina, in terms of sourcing labour, finding labour, it's not an easy task. You're competing with other industries. I suppose the farms that the farms that do and can, maybe is there any tips for listeners in terms of, right, we're heading into September, we're saying really asking somebody to come on board the first week of February isn't probably going to work. So it's from here on in, really, people should be thinking about labour and maybe trying to get labour organised. Any tips or tricks or what you've seen maybe over the years for listeners in terms of how they might do that?
So the first one, and James, you've mentioned it there, is in terms of timing. Okay, so you're setting yourself up for failure, really, and the person, if you bring them into your business when it's bang on, your most busiest time. When you think that through, how are you going to have time and patience? Your stress levels are up, to train that person and give them a chance. Okay, so really, you need to wind back and start. If you don't have the people in place now, you need to start going about looking about getting someone in place. Okay, so in terms of how are farmers finding people? Word of mouth is a big one, James. So making it known that you're in the business of hiring people. Okay, so a lot of people pass your gate, your farmyard, they don't know you're actually looking for someone. Okay, the amount of parents and students in particular, parents that would only love their teenage children to have a job, a part-time job, at weekends and their holidays, it's massive, and I really genuinely don't think we're tapping into it enough. There's fantastic students out there, male and female, just excellent. Okay, so I don't think we're tapping into that. I think they're actually down the road from you. I think they're passing your gate, going into town with CVs, and that's the reality of it. And they're going into SuperValu and Dunnes and Centras, and there's a mile long. They won't even take their CVs. They've that many. And why do they go there? They go there because they see younger people there, or they know that they take on part-time staff. That's why they're going there. So how are people locally going to know? Okay. And particularly if you've never hired anyone before, maybe it's all family help and this is the first time you're starting to look for someone out there, you actually have to go leave your farm and tell people. Okay. And a lot of farmers would say where they're finding people or where parents are coming up to them or they're chatting is at the football matches and hurling matches. Okay. And they say it's a great way of actually finding people.
Is the problem that sometimes they're too busy to actually get to those?
Spot on. You're too busy, you're clocking up your 70, 80 hours a week. You're not going to matches. You're not going to these things. You're in your own bubble, in your own farm. Okay. So nobody knows that you're in the business of finding people or that you would be delighted to have someone. So you're spot on there, James. So you actually need to leave your farm. If you want to find people, you actually need to leave because they're an odd farmer because they've built up a great reputation and they've been hiring. People do come to their doors. Okay. But that takes years for that to happen. Okay. So if you're starting off particularly, in particular, you need to get out there and you need to go and say it to people. So that's one thing, James. But you need to be clear about what you're offering. Okay.
So I was going to say, what's the expectations then? Because I think it's that early period where maybe a lot of these arrangements actually fall down. Mm-hmm. So what should I'm a higher and dairy farmer, first time. What's my expectations in terms of what this person should be fit to do, shouldn't be fit to do? How long is this training period, and how long does my patience have to last?
So, by and large, number one is attitude. Okay, so I think sometimes, particularly where the farmer is on the farm full time, looking for somebody that has experience from a dairy farm is quite questionable. And when I talk to a lot of farmers that say the best people they have from a farm at all, okay, and they say you can actually train them up to do the tasks. They don't know any different as you'd like, okay. But the big thing is attitude. That the person, has a good attitude to work, that will turn up on time, that wants to work, that wants to earn a few bob, and wants to learn. That's the key requirement, and that's what any business person is looking for, attitude. You can train that person then. So I suppose how do you know? Obviously, you talk to people around as best as you can about the person in question or the students or whatever it may be. But really, a lot of time you have to give them a go, give them a trial period. and say, look, be very clear with your communication, because the last thing you want to do is fall out with anyone or have any parents or whatever not too happy with you. So be clear with them and say, look, I'll give you a try for whatever it may be. 2 weeks, like some farmers will say, I know within the first day. I know within the first hour if the person's going to work. But then others will say, look, I was a little bit disappointed with the person initially because I'd heard so much good references about them. I thought they were going to hit the ground running and be super, and they weren't. But you know what? We worked around it because they had a good attitude. They don't bang out work as much as I'd like, and maybe my expectations were too high in the first place. So we work around that once the attitude is good. You can't fix bad attitude. I don't care what facilities you have, how good you are with people, you can't fix that. So get that right. Give them a trial period. Be clear about that. Communicate that to them. Okay. And if it doesn't work out, then they can't say, that you just let them go all of a shot and never give them a proper chance. Be clear about the hours. Talk to them. What suits them? Have they football matches? Have they whatever? What's their schedule like? If they're in college, what's the timetable like, or when will you be getting your timetable or whatever? And see, can you work around them? And when do they go out? That's what's important to them, and it's usually during the week. Okay. And what can be important to you is weekend work. Okay. So find all that out and then talk about pay and be straight with them. Okay. And maybe it might be a case that starting off, it's a bit lower and say, look, if it works out and, you're happy and I am happy, we'll discuss this in 6 months' time and I'll give you a few extra bob. Okay. But tell them that they don't know this. And they might be really put off by the sound of whatever you're paying, okay? But you do need to think about that as well, because pay is important along with hours. And then you have to have the lead in, as we've already discussed, in terms of training them. So you're not going to be able to train them properly in springtime. You need to do that in summertime or now, leading up now when you have a little bit more downtime, that you can do that. The other ways, James, is social media. And sometimes people say, oh, can we not just go with one channel? Well, I'm afraid that's the way it is. People are on all different social media sites. So look, get an ad up, get a clear, specific ad up that you're looking for a part-time person, that, flexibility in hours, a little bit around the tasks, so on and so forth. Get a nice, clean, simple ad up and put it on a few different channels. So, you know what I mean? Some people put on Facebook. Twitter is a quite common one. There's Gumtree, a few other sites like that. What harm? It doesn't really cost you anything. Put it on. Done Deal is another one. Why not? Give yourself the best chance to find a bigger pool of people, okay? And make sure you say, and particularly if you're there and you don't need experience, question, do you actually need someone with experience? Because you're reducing the amount of pool of people if you say experience required. Can you not train that person to milk cows or whatever it may be? So do question that one, because you're reducing the pool of people. So yeah, so look, they're the usual, from talking to most people in terms of where they find people, they're the usual, I suppose, avenues, James.
Yeah. Anyone that has a question there, I see a hand raised, just post it in the Q&A box and I'll ask Martina before we finish up. I suppose the other one is, ultimately, in terms of what initiatives are Teagasc, I see as something, there new initiatives there, in terms of training the next generation of, let it be farm workers, farm managers, that whole space is there new initiatives there from Teagasc in terms of, and I suppose they have a role to play in all of this as well.
Yeah, sure. Look, absolutely, James. Look, sure, you have the courses that are going on in all the local Teagasc offices and the agricultural colleges, and you have the new apprenticeship course, James, that was advertised there recently. So there's changes made to the current course, James. So you have that in terms of trying to train people and give them experience and go on work experience along with college and the I suppose that kind of blended learning. And then I suppose for the employers, we have people management courses every year. So again, and I suppose it's one thing that I didn't say, but I suppose farmers that I suppose that have maybe a better success rate of finding people and keeping people and people would have a lot of good things to say about them. They would tend to go on some, and it's not necessarily a Teagasc course, but some kind of people management courses, to upskill. Not everyone isn't naturally good with people, and particularly if you've never worked outside of the farm before and you always just worked with your parents or so on, you don't have experience any other experience of working in teams or working with other people. So it's certainly something that I have noticed that a lot more farmers are becoming aware of, saying, you know what, I actually thought, working with people is working with people. Like, what do I need to go to a course for? For God's sake, I've been talking to people all my life. But there's things you just don't think of. You're in your own bubble. You're used to X, Y, and Z, and you just don't think of it. So going to a 1 or 2 day course can be massive in terms of getting you off to the right start with working with people, because you start to put yourself in their shoes. And you think quite differently then when you do that, and you have a much better chance. And communication is a massive one, and that's talked in the people management courses. So that's another avenue in terms. That's for the farmer James, but or farm managers. So that's another avenue as well. And I think the courses are starting to take off and become more popular. But we need to keep reminding people of these courses, and that the training, no more than grass training, is required, or genetics or whatever it may be. We actually need to constantly remind ourselves and upskill in terms of working with people.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's an important point, and maybe one where we finish up ultimately. But I suppose it's to bring that labour, managing people, time off into a place where it's at the same level as the breeding, as the grassland management, because often it's left out to one side, Martina. People are working too hard, too long of hours. We understand completely, of course, there's periods of the year where there's additional hours required, but it's just setting yourself up that, as you say, there's a massive variation in terms of the hours and the amount of time people is taken off. And like a Sunday where the 2 relief milkings are done, that's a day off, Martina. It's not like you have to you don't have to get on the plane and fly to wherever it is. A day off can be something as a number of relief milkings, or half a day off, or whatever it is in the week, and a bit of scheduling around that.
100%. Yeah, that's a key point, James. Yeah, that's a key point. But just as you mentioned there, the breeding and the grassland, James, and you'd often see figures quoted, I think by ICBF in terms of I suppose showing what breeding and the breeding index has done for the industry and for dairy farms, and it's quantified in, I don't know what the exact figure is, in billions, but I think we need to be more ambitious and maybe put more of a value and a figure in terms of from a labour point of view. Okay, so I'll give the example. So I've already said that about 75% of farmers are having their evenings off. Because the milking interval or the milking time in the evening is prolonged. Okay, so I think a target should be that over the next few years, 80-90% of farms are finished by 6. That doesn't mean you can't go back out. Okay, and I think that's misunderstood. You absolutely, it's your business and you're the owner. You can go back out now and again, but you don't need to always go back out. So you have the opportunity there, and you have the flexibility to do other things. But I think that would be a massive goal, and put massive, I suppose, really bring labour and labour efficiency, and you can call it whatever you want, making dairy farming more attractive, or really bringing it in line with other businesses. I think it would be a massive one. Okay, and I think it's a great place to start, and we're definitely offsiding it, James. Okay, so I suppose that's a goal I would have over the next few years. And anyone listening who have changed their milking times, don't be shy about it. If you come across other farmers, and I know farmers who would often advise farmers in terms of their cow types and different things, ask them about their milking times. Tell them what changes you made. Let's not be shy about this. It's making dairy farming more sustainable and more attractive. So it should be a goal, and we should be putting a big euro sign over it.
So really, if we finish up there, Martina, if you're not milking at 4 o'clock in the evening or in the afternoon, or haven't been up till now, try it for the remainder of the year.
Give it a go. There's no such thing as which time, which part of the year or which season do I do. Just give it a go. It's a habit a lot of times. Now we're taking, and I better say that I'll be shot, because there is a small percentage of farms where the milking time is later because of small children in the house. That's 100% fine. But we can't say that the reason 75% are offside is because of that. Okay, so there's still a big percentage that's offside because of habit, James. It's habit, but habits can be broken. Okay. And that's the big one. It does take a bit of time and you need to think about it and get your head around it. And it's just the way you work. Okay. But, just one thing to note is that farmers who've moved their milking times, right, to have more time off in the evening and make the business more attractive, their farms aren't falling apart. Okay. So they're after going from milking at 5 o'clock in the evening to 4 or 3:30, something like that. So an hour and a half per day, less. And you say, how are they getting away with that? Sure, they mustn't be running their farm right at all, or things are letting slide, or things like that. That's not the case. Okay, the case is when you talk to them, you'll say, well, what's changed? You getting in more labour? How are you doing this? They'll say, you know what? I was actually quite efficient. And I'm a bit embarrassed maybe, and I don't want to admit it, but I was actually quite efficient in that I knew I had extra time. So I was taking longer breaks that I didn't really need to take, or I was, being very slow about getting jobs done, or I was forgetting things, or I was going into town, I was pottering about, a bit like that. Whereas now, as I pulled it forward, that means when I have my lunch, I have this time left and I'm much more efficient. Okay. So I think that's a key point there, James.
We appreciate that, Martina. I think it's a good insight, as I said, into something that maybe isn't discussed enough at individual farm level, and it's something for people to mull over and think about as we head into the remainder of 2023. And I suppose now's the time to get yourself prepared in terms of whatever additional labour you do require for next spring is the big point. So as always, thanks a million, Martina. What I will say is, folks, it's as always, is busy on farms. Do farm safely. We'll be joined by Kieran Hearn next week from PastureBiz Ireland in terms of give us an update on 2023 so far and maybe what to look out for the remainder of the grazing season. So thanks a million for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.
That's all for this week's bonus episode from the Let's Talk Dairy webinar series, and don't forget to look out for more bonus episodes each week. I'll be back with the usual Dairy Age podcast on Monday, so do listen in then. I'm Stuart Childs, and thanks for listening.